I laughed it off that night. I want to be honest about that, because everything that came after started with me laughing something off that I should have paid attention to. My name is Owen Hale. I'm 31. I fix motorcycles for a living, which means I spend most of my day elbow deep in engines that make more sense to me than most people do. Machines are honest. You take them apart, you find the problem, you put them back together, and they work again. People don't cooperate like that. People break in ways you can't always diagnose. And sometimes the person who breaks you the worst is someone you never saw coming. 2 years before that conversation in the kitchen, I had been engaged. Her name was Kayla, and we'd been friends first. Real friends. The kind who told each other everything. The kind who spent 3 years building something slow and steady before it ever turned romantic. I thought that meant it would last. I thought friendship first meant we understood each other in a way most couples never got the chance to. Turned out understanding someone and being able to build a life with them are two very different things. She left 2 months before the wedding, not for someone else, just for a version of herself that didn't want to be tied down yet. She told me she loved me the way you love an old photograph. Nice to look at, not something you build a future around. That sentence took something out of me that never fully grew back. After that, I made a rule, simple, clean, easy to repeat when people asked why I was still single at 31. Never date a friend. Friendship and romance are two different foundations, and you can't build a house on both at once without one of them cracking. I said that rule so many times it stopped feeling like an opinion and started feeling like a fact of nature, like gravity, like the boiling point of water. I believed it completely, which is probably why fate, or whatever you want to call the thing that enjoys making fools of confident people, decided to move Maddie Sinclair into the spare room of my apartment 4 months after I said that rule out loud to her for the first time. Maddie and I had known each other for almost 3 years before we ever lived together. We met through my best friend Derek, who used to work with her at a marketing firm downtown before she left to freelance. She was sharp in a way that made rooms rearrange themselves around her without her trying. Quick wit, faster opinions, the kind of woman who could deflate an arrogant man's ego with 4 words and a raised eyebrow. She was 29, dark red hair she usually kept twisted up with a pin stuck through it, because she said pins were more reliable than actual hair accessories, and green eyes that missed absolutely nothing. We got along instantly, the easy kind of getting along that never once felt like flirting because neither of us was looking for that. She'd just gone through a brutal breakup with a guy named Chris who spent 2 years convincing her she was too intense, too much, too everything, right up until he left her for someone quieter. I'd just buried the wedding that never happened. We were both walking wounded, and walking wounded people make excellent friends because they recognize the limp in each other without having to ask about it. When her lease ended and my roommate moved out the same month, it made too much sense not to happen. Split the rent, split the groceries, two people who already trusted each other. No drama, no expectations. We shook on it over beers at Derek's birthday party like we were signing a business contract. Strictly platonic, Maddie said, holding up her bottle. Strictly platonic, I agreed, and we clinked glasses like idiots who thought a toast could override chemistry. For the first year, the rule held perfectly. We built a rhythm that worked. She made coffee in the mornings because she was up first. I handled dishes because she burned every pan she touched. We split Sunday grocery runs, and every Friday night, no matter what else was happening in our lives, we ordered too much Thai food and argued about reality television like the fate of the country depended on it. She dated occasionally. I dated occasionally. We gave each other feedback on outfits before dates and commentary afterward that ranged from supportive to savage depending on how the date had gone. It was, by every measure, the healthiest relationship of my adult life, and it wasn't even a relationship. That should have told me something too. The conversation that started everything happened on a Tuesday in March. Nothing special about the date. Nothing special about the evening except that it rained hard enough to keep us both inside instead of out with our separate friend groups. Maddie was on the couch with her laptop, freelancing on some brand campaign she kept muttering complaints about. and I was at the kitchen counter going through mail that was mostly bills pretending to be important. I had coffee with Priya today, she said without looking up. Priya was her older cousin, the kind of relative who asked pointed questions at every family gathering and reported the answers back to the rest of the family like a courier service. How'd that go? She asked when I was going to stop living with a man I'm clearly in love with and just marry him already. I nearly dropped the stack of mail. She said that about Derek? Maddie looked up, unimpressed. About you, genius. I set the mail down slowly. What did you tell her? I told her we were roommates. I told her you were basically a piece of furniture with opinions about motor oil. She went back to her screen like the sentence hadn't just detonated quietly in my chest. She didn't believe me. Smart woman. Maddie's eyes flicked up again. Meaning? Meaning anyone who spends 30 seconds in this apartment can tell we like each other's company. Doesn't mean anything beyond that. I said it easily. The way you say something you've rehearsed so many times it comes out smooth, even when it isn't entirely true anymore. I don't date friends anyway. She set her laptop down on the cushion beside her, folding her legs underneath herself, giving me that look she gave people right before she said something that landed harder than they expected. Funny, she said. Neither would I. Until now. The room went quiet in a way rooms only go quiet when someone has said something they didn't mean to say out loud, or something they meant completely and were terrified to have heard. I couldn't tell which one it was, and for a second, neither, I think, could she. Then she laughed, short and a little too fast, and reached for her laptop again like the sentence had never existed. I'm kidding, she said. Obviously. Obviously, I repeated, and went back to my mail, and neither of us mentioned it again for 6 weeks. But I remembered it. I remembered it the way you remember the exact moment before an accident, the half second where you could still swerve, except I didn't swerve because I told myself there was nothing to swerve away from. It was a joke. Roommate's joke. That's what roommates do to pass rainy Tuesdays. Except jokes don't usually make you lie awake at 1 a.m. replaying the exact inflection in someone's voice. Except jokes don't usually make you notice, 3 days later, the way she laughed at something Derek said at dinner and feel something twist low in your stomach that had no business being there. Except jokes don't usually make you start paying attention to details you'd apparently been ignoring on purpose for 2 years. The way she hummed off-key while doing dishes. The way she always left the last bite of anything on her plate for someone else, like generosity was a reflex she couldn't turn off. The way she remembered, without being told twice, that I took my coffee black except on days I'd had a bad one, when I wanted it sweet enough to apologize for the day itself. I told myself none of that meant anything. I had a rule. Rules exist precisely for moments when your feelings get inconvenient, and mine were getting extremely inconvenient. The next real crack in the foundation came about a month later, at a bar downtown where half our friend group had gathered for Derek's promotion. Maddie wore a black dress she didn't wear often, the kind of thing that made 3 separate men find excuses to buy her drinks over the course of 2 hours. I watched all 3 attempts fail with a satisfaction I had no right to feel. I told myself it was protective instinct, the kind you'd have for any friend. I told myself a lot of things that spring. It was the 4th guy who finally got under my skin, a broad-shouldered finance type named Trent who leaned against the bar next to her with the confidence of someone who had never once been told no in his life. I watched from across the room as he said something that made Maddie's polite smile tighten at the edges, the smile she used for men she was 2 sentences away from dismissing entirely. You should go rescue her, Derek said beside me, following my gaze. She doesn't need rescuing. She's handled worse than Trent with one eyebrow. Sure, Derek said, grinning in a way I didn't love. But you want to. I didn't answer that, mostly because he was right, and I wasn't ready to admit it out loud. I watched a few more minutes, watched Trent lean in a little too close, watched Maddie take a small step back that he either didn't notice or didn't care about, and something in me made the decision before the rest of me caught up. I crossed the room, slid in beside her, and set my hand lightly at the small of her back like it was the most natural gesture in the world. Hey, I said. Sorry I'm late. They wouldn't let me leave the shop. Maddie's eyes found mine. Quick, grateful, amused all at once. She understood the play instantly, the way she understood most things about me instantly. "There you are," she said, sliding effortlessly into the fiction. "Trent, this is Owen, my roommate." Trent's expression did the thing men's expressions do when they realize the woman they've been circling has backup. "Roommate," he repeated, glancing between us. "It's a long story," Maddie said sweetly, and looped her arm through mine like it was choreography we'd rehearsed 100 times, though we never had. Trent excused himself within 90 seconds. We watched him retreat toward the bar, and Maddie exhaled, some tension leaving her shoulders that I hadn't noticed she was carrying. "Thank you," she said. He'd asked for my number twice already and didn't seem to understand that not answering was an answer. "Some men need the subtitles," I said. She looked up at me, and her arm was still through mine, and neither of us had made a move to separate. "You didn't have to do the whole boyfriend routine. Would concerned friend routine have worked as well?" "No," she admitted. "Definitely not." A pause, longer than it should have been. "You're good at that, you know. Showing up right when it matters. It's a skill I've been perfecting for 3 years. You're a high-maintenance friend." She laughed and finally let go of my arm, and the moment folded itself back into normal, but something had shifted. Some small tectonic plate under the surface of our friendship had slid a fraction of an inch, and I felt the aftershock the rest of the night every time our eyes happened to meet across the bar. I should have talked to her that night. I should have said something honest instead of retreating into jokes and distance. But I had a rule, and rules are easiest to keep when you refuse to look directly at the thing threatening them. The real trouble started when Chris came back. Maddie's ex had been gone from her life for almost 2 years by then, long enough that she rarely mentioned him, long enough that I'd started to think of him as a closed chapter rather than an ongoing storyline. Then, on a Thursday evening in late April, she came home from a coffee shop meeting with a client looking pale in a way I recognized immediately, the specific paleness of someone who has just run into a piece of their past standing in line for a latte. "You okay?" I asked, looking up from the couch, where I'd been half watching some documentary about deep-sea creatures. She dropped her bag by the door, sat down heavily on the armrest instead of the cushion, like she hadn't fully committed to staying. "Ran into Chris. I muted the TV. How'd that go?" "He's engaged." She said it flatly, like she was testing how the words felt in her mouth before deciding what to do with them. "To someone named Priscilla. He showed me a picture. Unprompted. Like I'd asked. That's a special kind of tactless. He also told me I looked good, in the tone men use when they mean I looked better than they expected, given how badly things ended." She rubbed her temples. "And then he asked if I was seeing anyone, and when I said no, he did this thing with his face, this little pitying thing, like he felt sorry for me." I felt something hot flare up under my ribs, entirely disproportionate to the situation. "He said that? To your face?" "Not in words. His face said it. His face has always been very talkative." She finally sat all the way down on the cushion, pulling her knees up. "It's stupid. I know it's stupid. I don't want him back. I haven't wanted him back in over a year. But there's something about seeing someone move on so completely, engaged, glowing, probably already picking out a venue, while you're still figuring out how to trust the next person who says they love you. I didn't have a smooth line ready for that one. I just moved from the chair to the couch and sat close enough that our shoulders touched. "For what it's worth," I said, "the fact that you haven't rushed into anything since him isn't a sign you're behind. It's a sign you actually learned something. Chris didn't teach Priscilla anything. He's about to hand her the same unfinished version of himself he handed you." Maddie turned to look at me, something soft and startled in her expression. "That's annoyingly wise for a man who fixes carburetors for a living. I contain multitudes." She laughed, small but real, and leaned her head briefly against my shoulder, just for a second, just long enough for me to feel the weight of it and want it to stay longer than it did. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not telling me I'm being dramatic. You're allowed to be dramatic about people who made you feel small for 2 years." She sat up straight again, some of the color returning to her face. "When did you get good at this?" I've had a lot of practice being the guy people cry to about other people. Never quite figured out how to be the guy they cry to about me. The sentence left my mouth before I'd fully approved it, and I watched Maddie go very still beside me, processing it, turning it over. For a second I thought she might say something that would change the whole shape of the evening. Instead, she reached for the remote, unmuted the documentary, and said, "These jellyfish are surprisingly aggressive for something with no brain." And the moment passed, gently, deliberately, both of us choosing the easier road because the harder one was too unfamiliar to trust yet. But something had cracked open that night that didn't close again. I started noticing how often we ended up like that, shoulder to shoulder on the couch, closer than the space technically required. I started noticing how Maddie would text me updates from her day like I was the first person she wanted to tell things to, not the emergency contact, the actual first choice. I started noticing that when I imagined my future, the version I actually wanted, without editing it for public consumption, it had her in it, not as a roommate, not as a friend I lived with, but as the person across the table every single morning, indefinitely. That terrified me more than almost anything Kayla had ever done. Because Kayla had taught me that turning a friendship into a romance was building your house on ground that could shift beneath you without warning. I had watched it happen. I had lived the aftermath. And now here I was, staring down the exact same setup. Except this time the stakes felt higher because Maddie wasn't just someone I loved being around. She was someone I couldn't imagine my life functioning properly without. I tried to fix it the way I fixed everything, by avoiding the problem until it either resolved itself or became unavoidable. I started going out more, dating half-heartedly, trying to convince myself that the feelings crowding my chest around Maddie were just loneliness wearing a familiar face. I went on 3 dates in 3 weeks with a woman named Priya from the gym. Nice enough, pretty enough, entirely wrong in ways I couldn't articulate except that every single date I found myself comparing her laugh to Maddie's laugh, her opinions to Maddie's opinions, and coming up short every single time. Maddie noticed. Of course she noticed. She noticed everything. "You've been going out a lot," she said one evening, not looking up from the crossword she was doing at the kitchen table. "Trying to get back out there." "With Priya from the gym?" "How do you know about Priya from the gym?" "You talk in your sleep sometimes when the TV's on, and you fall asleep on the couch." Mostly nonsense, but her name came up. She glanced up then, something careful in her expression. "Is it going well?" "It's fine. Fine." She repeated the word like she was testing its weight. "That's not a ringing endorsement." "It's early." "Sure." She went back to her crossword, but her pen had stopped moving. "You know you don't have to do that for my benefit, right?" I frowned. "Do what?" "Prove you're not interested in me by dating half the city." The room dropped 10 degrees in about a second and a half. I set down the glass I'd been holding with more care than the moment probably required, buying myself time I didn't actually use well. "That's not what I'm doing, isn't it?" Maddie set the pen down entirely now, turning in her chair to face me fully. "Owen, I've lived with you for almost 2 years. I know your patterns. You get quiet and busy right after something happens that scares you. You started going out more the week after Chris, the week after I fell asleep on your shoulder during the jellyfish documentary. I'm not stupid. I didn't have a rehearsed line for that one either. I have a rule," I said finally, which sounded exactly as inadequate out loud as it had started to feel internally. "I know. Never date a friend." She said it without malice, just tired honesty. "You've said it probably 30 times since I moved in. I used to think it was just a thing you said. Lately I've started wondering if it's something you say because you're scared, not because you believe it." "Kayla and I were friends first," I said quietly. "Best friends." It felt like the safest, most solid thing in the world, and then it wasn't. It just wasn't enough, and I lost both things at once, the girlfriend and the friend, because turns out you can't really go back once you've gone forward. Maddie's face softened, all the challenge draining out of it, replaced with something gentler. "I'm not Kayla. I know that. Do you?" She stood, crossing the small distance of the kitchen until she was standing close enough that I had to actually look at her instead of past her. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're punishing both of us for something she did." That landed harder than anything Chris could have said to her at that coffee shop. I opened my mouth to argue and found I didn't have an argument, just the old fear dressed up as logic, the same fear I'd been carrying around for 2 years like a set of keys to a house I refused to enter again. I don't know how to risk this, I admitted finally. I don't know how to risk you. Something in Maddie's eyes went bright. That's the first honest thing you've said to me in a month. I've been honest with you plenty. You've been friendly with me plenty. Honest is different. She wrapped her arms around herself, not defensively, just like she needed something to hold on to while she said the next part. I've been sitting on this for a while too, Owen. Longer than that Tuesday in March, if I'm being fully honest. I think some part of me has known since the coffee, since you remembered how I take it before I ever told you. Since you started leaving the porch light on for me on nights I worked late, like it mattered to you whether I got home safe. I told myself it was just what good roommates do. Then I told myself it was just what good friends do. I'm running out of categories to put it in that aren't the real one. The kitchen felt very small and very warm all of a sudden. What's the real one? I asked, even though some part of me already knew. Maddie held my gaze steady. I think I'm in love with you. And I think I have been for longer than either of us wants to admit. And I think we've both been so terrified of ruining a good thing that we've let it stay smaller than it wants to be. She let out a shaky breath. There. Now you know. Do with it what you want. I stood there for a long moment. The rule I'd repeated so many times. The wall I'd built so carefully after Kayla, cracking under the weight of one sentence spoken by a woman standing 3 feet away in her socks with a crossword puzzle abandoned on the table behind her. I don't want to lose you, I said finally. That's the whole reason for the rule. Not because I don't feel it. Because I feel it too much, and losing a friend hurts different than losing a girlfriend, and I was scared of losing both at once again. You could lose me anyway, Maddie said quietly. Someday, somehow, for some reason neither of us can predict right now. That's true whether we date or not. Life doesn't hand out guarantees for staying platonic either. I could get hit by a bus tomorrow, Owen. Or move across the country for work. Or just drift the way friends sometimes drift when life gets busy. Playing it safe doesn't actually protect you from losing people. It just guarantees you never had the thing worth losing in the first place. I hadn't thought about it that way. 2 years of careful distance, and I'd never once considered that the safety I thought I was protecting was an illusion, a story I told myself to avoid the real risk, which wasn't losing her. The real risk was choosing her and then not being brave enough to keep choosing her when things got hard. The way I apparently hadn't been brave enough with Kayla either, if I was being honest about my own part in that ending. Say it again, I said. Maddie tilted her head. Say what? What you said. About being in love with me. Her mouth curved, something vulnerable and hopeful moving across her face. I'm in love with you, Owen Hale. Have been for a while. Longer than I've been willing to admit, even to myself. I crossed the last 3 feet of kitchen tile between us and framed her face with both hands, careful, like she was something I'd been trained my whole life not to touch too roughly. I'm in love with you too, I said. I think I have been since the jellyfish documentary, if I'm being precise about it. That's a strange anniversary to pick. You fell asleep on my shoulder, and I didn't move for 40 minutes because I didn't want to wake you. A man doesn't do that for a roommate. Maddie laughed, bright and surprised and a little wet around the edges. And then I kissed her, soft at first, careful, the kind of kiss that feels less like a beginning and more like the honest conclusion of something that had been building for 2 years without either of us naming it out loud. When we pulled apart, she stayed close, her forehead resting against mine, both of us breathing like we'd just run somewhere important. So she whispered, Still think friendship and romance can't share a foundation? I think, I said slowly, that Kayla and I were friends who never actually let ourselves be honest with each other. We performed friendship the way we later performed a relationship, always managing each other's feelings instead of just having them. That's different from this. This feels like the first time I've been fully honest with anyone in years. That's a very good save for a man who just got his entire worldview dismantled in his own kitchen. I told you, I contain multitudes. She kissed me again, softer this time, unhurried, and something in my chest that had been clenched tight for 2 years finally, quietly let go. We didn't tell anyone right away. That was Maddie's idea, and I understood the wisdom in it immediately. We wanted a few weeks that belonged only to us before the entire friend group got their hands on it. Before Derek started taking credit for something he had absolutely nothing to do with. Before Priya asked her invasive questions at the next family gathering with a satisfied look on her face. We wanted to know what we were before we announced it to a jury. Those weeks were some of the best of my life. Nothing about our daily routine changed much on the surface. Same Thai food Fridays, same grocery runs, same easy banter over dishes. Except now there was a hand reaching for another hand across the couch. Now there was a kiss goodbye when one of us left for work. Now there was a different kind of quiet between us at night. The comfortable kind that comes from two people who have stopped hiding things from each other. We told Derek first, mostly because he showed up unannounced one Saturday morning and caught us making pancakes together in a way that apparently required no explanation once he saw the way Maddie handed me the spatula without either of us speaking, an entire silent conversation passing between us that he read instantly. "Oh, thank God," he said, dropping onto a kitchen stool like his legs had given out from relief. "Finally, do you have any idea how long I've had to listen to both of you individually deny this to my face, while looking absolutely miserable about it?" "We weren't miserable," I said. "Owen, you texted me at 1 a.m. in February asking if it was normal to think about someone's laugh for 4 hours straight. I've been waiting for this development since February." Maddie shot me a look somewhere between amused and betrayed. "You texted him that?" "I was going through something." "You were going through denial," Derek said. "Extensively. For months. It was exhausting to watch from the outside, honestly. Congratulations, though. Genuinely. You two have been the worst-kept secret in this friend group since the moment you moved in together." The rest of our friends took it about the same way, various shades of "I told you so" mixed with real happiness, which was more than I'd expected and more, I think, than either of us had let ourselves hope for. Priya, Maddie's cousin, sent a single text that read simply, "Finally," with no punctuation and no further comment necessary. The only real complication came, predictably, from Chris. He found out through the friend group grapevine about 6 weeks after Maddie and I had gone public, and he apparently decided this development required his personal input, because he showed up at the coffee shop where Maddie sometimes worked, unannounced, while I happened to be there too, waiting to walk her home. "Heard you're dating your roommate now," Chris said, sliding uninvited into the empty chair at our table, the confidence of a man who had clearly never learned to read a room in his life. "Fast work." Maddie's spine straightened. "It's been almost 3 years of friendship, Chris. I wouldn't call it fast." Sure. Just funny is all. You spent 2 years telling me you needed space, needed independence, weren't ready to move in with anyone. And here you are, shacked up with a guy for 2 years before you even started dating him." He smiled like he'd made a devastating point instead of an irrelevant one. I set my coffee down slowly. "That how you remember it? Because from what I understand, she told you she needed space from someone who made her feel small every time she had an opinion of her own. That's a little different from not being ready to commit." Chris's smile faltered slightly. "This isn't about me. You made it about you the second you sat down uninvited," I said, keeping my voice level. "You're engaged, Chris, to Priscilla. You showed her a picture in a coffee shop like it was supposed to sting. Seems like you got exactly what you wanted. I'm not sure what you're doing here, trying to make Maddie feel bad about finding the same thing." Something flickered across Chris's face, some recognition that he'd walked into a conversation he wasn't going to win. "I just think it's a little sudden, is all. Roommate to boyfriend. People are going to talk." "People talked when you and Priscilla got engaged after 4 months," Maddie said calmly. "Nobody outside your own head is keeping score on how fast anyone falls in love, Chris. I think you're just having a harder time than you expected seeing me happy without you in the picture." Chris opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again like he was searching for something clever to land as a parting shot, and coming up empty. Finally, he just stood, straightened his jacket unnecessarily, and said, "Well, Good for you too, I guess, in a tone that made it clear he didn't mean a single word of it. We watched him leave. Maddie let out a long breath once the door closed behind him. That felt good, she admitted. Which part? All of it. Watching you not let him get away with it. Watching myself not let him get away with it either. She reached across the table and laced her fingers through mine. I used to think I needed someone to defend me from men like that. Turns out I just needed someone who'd stand beside me while I defended myself. I can do both, I said. Defending and standing beside. I contain multitudes, remember? She laughed, and the sound of it in that coffee shop, easy and unguarded, made something in my chest settle in a way it hadn't settled in years. There was one more wobble before things settled into something solid. And I think it's worth telling because it's the part nobody puts in the highlight reel of a good relationship. About 3 months in, Maddie went quiet for almost a week. The kind of quiet that isn't about anger, but about someone working something out privately before they're ready to say it out loud. I noticed it the way you notice weather changing, a shift in pressure before the storm actually arrives. She was still warm, still affectionate, still left notes on the fridge in her looping handwriting. But there was a distance behind her eyes some mornings that hadn't been there before. I gave her 3 days before I finally asked, mostly because I'd learned over 3 years of friendship that Maddie needed room to arrive at her own conclusions rather than being cornered into them. On the 4th night, I set 2 mugs of tea on the coffee table, sat down across from her instead of beside her, and said, "Something's sitting on you. I'd rather you hand it to me than carry it alone." She wrapped both hands around her mug like she needed the warmth for more than just her palms. "I keep waiting for this to feel less terrifying," she admitted. "I thought once we said it out loud, once we told everyone, once it became real instead of a secret, the fear would ease off. It hasn't. If anything, it's worse, because now there's actually something to lose." "That's not a flaw in us," I said. "That's just what it feels like to care about something enough to be scared of losing it." I know that logically. I still lie awake, sometimes running through every way this could go wrong. What if we're better as friends, and we just don't know it yet because it's still new? What if 6 months from now the version of you that adores me starts resenting me the way Chris eventually did? What if I ruin the one relationship in my life that's never once let me down? I reached across the table and took the mug out of her hands, setting it down so I could hold both of hers instead. "I can't promise you it won't get hard sometimes," I said. "Every real relationship gets hard eventually. That's not a warning sign. That's just what happens when 2 whole people try to build something together. What I can promise is that I'm not going anywhere the first time it gets uncomfortable. I've already lost you once, in the version of this where I never said anything and just watched you eventually fall for somebody else because I was too scared to speak up. That was worse than any version of this being hard. I'd take hard with you over easy without you every single time." Maddie's eyes filled, and she let out a shaky laugh that was mostly relief. "You're better at this than you give yourself credit for." "I've had a very patient teacher," I said. "She fell asleep on my shoulder during a documentary about jellyfish once and changed my entire life without even waking up." That got the real laugh out of her, the one that used to make Chris feel threatened and made me feel like I'd won something every single time I heard it. Whatever had been sitting heavy on her that week loosened its grip that night, not because the fear disappeared completely, but because she'd said it out loud and I hadn't flinched from it. That, more than any of the good moments, is probably what convinced me we were going to be fine. Not the ease. The willingness to sit in the hard parts together instead of retreating into old habits of managing things alone. 6 months into dating properly, we sat down one evening and had the conversation neither of us had rushed into. The one about whether continuing to live together as a couple made sense, whether the arrangement that had started as a practical roommate situation could hold the weight of an actual relationship without either of us losing the independence we'd both fought hard to protect after our respective bad breakups. We decided it could, mostly because the honesty we'd built over 3 years of friendship gave us tools most new couples spend years developing. We already knew how to fight fair. We already knew how to apologize without turning it into a performance. We already knew each other's worst mornings and hadn't run from them. A year after that kitchen conversation, Maddie's freelance business had grown enough that she rented a small studio downtown, a real office separate from home, something she'd wanted for a long time but never quite had the confidence to pursue on her own. I helped her move filing cabinets and a second-hand desk up 2 flights of stairs, and when we finally collapsed onto the floor of her new empty office, sweating and laughing, she looked around at the bare walls and said, "I never would have done this without you pushing me." I didn't push you. I just kept telling you the truth about how good you are until you finally believed it. That's what pushing looks like when you're gentle about it. 2 years after that, I proposed. Not with an audience. Not with some elaborate public spectacle designed for other people to witness and post about later. I did it on a rainy Tuesday, deliberately, the same kind of rainy Tuesday that had started everything. Thai food containers open on the coffee table, some documentary neither of us was really watching playing in the background. I'd hidden the ring in the takeout bag, wrapped in a fortune cookie wrapper as a joke that immediately felt too small once I watched her actually open it and realize what she was holding. "Owen," she said, voice catching. "I told you once I didn't know how to risk this," I said, kneeling on our admittedly ugly living room rug that we'd been meaning to replace for 3 years and never had. Turns out the risk was never the problem. The problem was I hadn't found the right person to risk it with yet. I have now. I'd like to keep choosing you, on purpose, every single rainy Tuesday for the rest of my life, if you'll let me. She said yes before I even finished the sentence properly, which she later admitted was against every romantic instinct she had about letting a man finish his speech, but she said she simply couldn't wait one more second to say it. We got married the following spring in a small backyard ceremony, string lights, folding chairs, Derek giving a best man speech that somehow worked in 3 separate references to that 1 a.m. text about her laugh, much to Maddie's endless delight and my mild embarrassment. Priya cried through the entire ceremony and later admitted she'd known this was coming years before either of us did, which honestly tracked given everything else about her. These days, when people ask how we got together, Maddie usually starts with the joke. "He told me he'd never date a friend," she says, grinning. So naturally I told him neither would I. Funny how fast a rule falls apart once you actually mean the opposite of what you're saying. And I usually finish it the way I've come to believe it, fully, without the fear that used to sit underneath every version of that sentence. Turns out the rule was never really about friendship being the wrong foundation, I say. It was about being scared to build anything at all after watching one house fall down. Maddie didn't just break the rule. She showed me the rule was never protecting me from anything. It was just keeping me from the best thing that was already sitting across the kitchen table, waiting for me to notice. So tell me, would you ever risk a friendship for something more, even after swearing you never would? And have you ever had someone prove one of your firmest rules completely wrong, in the best possible way? Tell me your story in the comments. And if you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.